Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video I'm going to be talking about how to grip a medieval sword, okay? And I'm actually going to talk about three different types of swords, but I'm going to mostly focus on this this Type X sword that I've been covering a lot in this channel. And the reason is because this was very popular in the period that I mostly cover, which is prior to the 15th century, 10th, 11th, 12th century, where people are primarily wearing mail armor. Okay, so this is before plate armor. And with this type of a sword, the way I grip it is I focus mostly on my my ring finger and my middle finger. The pinky kind of sits on top of the pommel, and what I'm really doing is, as I swing the sword, right, I'm using my grip to, number one, get the right edge alignment. And this grip is pretty flat, and it kind of matches the blade, so it's really easy for me to tell where my blade at the edge is. Okay, so number one, I'm using this for edge alignment, and number two, I'm using my grip to keep the sword from flying out of my hand, because this sword basically, I'm creating all this momentum from back here, and I did a prior video on how I generate power. I think it's called how to cut with a sword. And what I'm doing is, like, I'll go hip, chest, and then extend. So all the power generation is back here from my hips and my chest. And basically, with my arm, I'm just kind of just letting the sword go out. Okay, and it doesn't matter where I'm going, left side, right side, back edge cut. Okay, as I'm swinging, I'm mostly feeling most of the pressure on top of my, where my ring finger is and my middle finger. Okay, so that's how I'm gripping the sword. I'm using it basically just to keep the sword from flying out of my hand, and the pommel kind of helps lock it into place. And this was a very popular sword because medieval knights, especially Normans. Normans were basically mounted Vikings. Okay, so they like fighting from horseback, and this sword is fairly long. So from horseback, you can use it effectively against, if you're riding up against somebody else, you can reach out, make it cut across, or if you're cutting down on the ground, you can reach down to the ground. Or even if you're, if this is my shield, if somebody's coming on my shield side, I can reach over my shield and make a cut to that side. So that's why this was a very popular sword, very common sword with Normans. Okay, now. I believe they also did occasionally finger this sword. There are some period sources that show that this was fingered. I believe that it's quite possible that people might have switched back and forth between holding it like this in the way I mentioned, or just fingering it, because sometimes you might feel that you're losing your grip here. You may want to lock it up over here. Now, people a lot of times will mention that, well, what about getting hit in the finger? Okay. Well, if you're holding the shield and using it the way you're supposed to be using it, nobody should be able to get to your hand. So let me grab a shield. So even if I'm fingering the sword, all right, and I'm swinging it, okay, you can see that my hand is well behind the shield, okay, and my finger should be relatively safe. Now, I personally don't like this grip. I find that it really stretches my finger out. I don't like it. I just prefer to grip it like this, and this works just great for me. Okay, basically the way I swing the sword, I'm basically using centripetal force, to move the sword out, and that my hands keeps, because if I were to let go of the sword, it would just keep going in that direction. Okay, so my grip just kind of keeps it from pulling out of my hand as I swing it. So that's how I use the Type X sword. Okay, let me put this down. And we'll talk about this Type 14 sword, okay? Now, this sword is a little bit shorter. The blade is a little bit more tapered. And this is a really fast sword. With this sword, I use body, but most of the power is coming from my shoulders and arms. And it's basically a speed sword. Because, and the other thing is, like, because most of the power is coming from my shoulders and my arm, there's less tell. Because if I'm making these big rotational cuts, when the sword's coming around here, you can kind of see where it's going. So in a tournament type of setting, or perhaps in a situation where where we're unarmored, right, with unarmored combat, I prefer to use a lighter, quicker sword. And the way I use my body with this type of a sword is, it's mostly shoulders and arms, but there's still a little bit of body that basically I'm using my body to brace the shot, to push into the shot. So the body kind of follows through and kind of finishes the shot, but the shot initiates in the shoulders and the arm, whereas with the other sword, with the Type X, the strike initiates in the hips, then the shoulders, and then finally just the arm just kind of extends. Whereas with this sword, the strike initiates in the shoulders and the arms, okay, and the body. And so anyway, the way I grip the sword is I tend to use a hammer grip, and it seems to work very well for me. Just make those really fast shots. Now another way that I will sometimes use this sword is I will use a push-pull, okay, where I'm loosening up these 3 fingers, and what that's doing is that's providing this push-pull. And let me put the shield down for a second. So using that push-pull, with my arm fully extended, okay, you can see that, there's, I'm taking little chips of wood out of this post, just by closing my my hand, okay. So that push-pull can generate some power, and then when you add the rest of the swing, okay, it's really fast. It delivers a lot of power. I don't always use it, and part of the reason why I don't always use it is if somebody basically stuffs my shot while I'm doing this, it can really throw off my combination. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why I sometimes don't use the push pull with this type of a sword, because if I'm striking and I hit the shield or somebody's sword before I intend to make contact, kind of in the middle of that push-pull, it can leave me it can leave my hand in an awkward position, especially when I'm doing like multiple combinations. I prefer with this type of sword. I prefer that hammer grip where I can, where I can take those multiple shots. But again, in this video, I'm discussing all the possibilities of using this sword. So the push-pull definitely works. It's something that a lot of fighters that I know use it. They use it very effectively. I prefer the hammer grip. Now, another way that people will sometimes use the sword is they will finger the guard, but they're doing it for a different reason than the Type X. With the Type X, when I finger, if I finger the guard, I'm using it to keep the sword from flying out of my hand. Here, I'm using it as a trigger. So, whereas before I'm using the push-pull, I'm squeezing these fingers here to pull the tip forward. Okay. Well, if I put my finger on top of it, right, and now I squeeze this finger and pull on that cross guard, that's also going to pull the tip forward. Okay, so that's another possibility. A lot of times people refer to this as a sword trigger. I don't like it, but people do use it, and a lot of people use it very effectively, so I can't discount it, and I'm going to kind of put it out there for you guys to try out. I'm a big believer that there's more than one way to do things. I believe in absorb all the information you can, try different things out, and see what you can make work for you. And one of the ways to test out what works is basically to, go to sparring. But when you spar, do it. You want to learn from your sparring. You want to spar. After each bout, you want to analyze what happened, why it happened. And move forward from there. Figure out what changes you need to make, and so forth. So those are the 3 ways of holding this sword. One is the hammer grip, which I tend to use, okay, for those fast cuts. The other way is the push-pull, right, to help generate that power. Okay, and the other way is to put your finger on top of here and use that as a trigger. And the same deal. I mean, as far as protecting your hand, if you're keeping the shield in the position that it's supposed to be in, okay, and you're using that trigger, your hand should be safe. Okay, so that's the other thing. Now, the other thing I'm going to mention is the rapier. Okay, let me put this down. And this is, well after the period that I really cover in this channel But I wanted to mention it because, number one, it's something that I do fight a lot, and I have a lot of experience with it, and it's just worth comparing the different styles. With the rapier, I tend to hold it back here. With this type of a grip, there's a little notch here where I can basically wrap my 2 fingers kind of around that little notch. Okay, and what I'll do is I'll put my index finger here, my pointer finger, and with the rapier, I'm mostly fighting a thrusting style. Okay, so my finger kind of helps guide my, it helps guide my tip in. Okay, so I'm using it to guide my tip in. Now another possibility is to finger this, and although I was very uncomfortable with using the trigger on that Type 14, using a trigger on this sword, especially if you're going to beat somebody's blade to the side, this is a lot. This is a little bit more comfortable to me. Even though I really don't use it so much, I can definitely see people using a finger trigger with this type of a sword, to make either a small cut or to beat somebody's blade to the side. I can generate plenty of power with just keeping my finger like that, and I can just beat somebody's blade and thrust through. So I tend to favor this guard, this grip like this. Okay, so a couple of things for you guys to think about. And try them out, see which one you like. The sword is kind of gonna tell you how it wants to be used. So if you're using like more of a Type X sword that's more blade heavy, it's gonna want to pull out of your hand. So you tend to use more rotational cuts, more body. So your grip tends to be more of sword retention. Keeping the sword from coming out of your hands, and just sword retention, and also changing the angles to get the different edge alignment, to get the proper edge alignment depending on what type of a cut you're making. And with the Type 14 sword, I'm basically using the grip, as I was saying, as a almost in a hammer position, the way I hold it, and I'm just going to basically just drive. It's almost like I'm boxing. I'm basically just punching through. So I'm punching, so I'm using it to drive through. I tend not to use that too much, but like right now, even though I'm in a hammer position, when I go to extension, I definitely give it that little extra pop. So even though I really don't loosen up, I definitely squeeze it a little bit tighter just before I make contact to give me that little extra pop. Okay, so I don't really use the push-pull, but I kind of use it a little bit just to tighten it up, firm it up at that last second, and just bring that tip forward just a tad bit, But a couple of things for you guys to think about. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up, share it. If you're not a member of the channel, subscribe. I'll see you guys next time.